Matthew Berktold Dawayu, Ganhara Diptegu, Mathakatla Diwalwatgu, Su Mathakatla Diwalzogu. My name is Matthew Berktold. I am of the Ganhara clan. The raven is my crest. I am from Metlakatla. I live here in New Metlakatla, Alaska. The tide cycle, it changes about every 6 hours. So about every 12 hours, the tide's either going in or going out. So 6 hours is for low tide, 6 hours for high tide, based on the change of it. So minus tides are the most important time for us. One, we're able to go out onto the beach to gather our subsistence lifestyles that we have here. And then on extreme high tides, we depend on those too to get firewood off the beach, as the logs will come in and get real high, and we can cut those easily when the tide goes out a little bit.
It's all due to the sun and the moon, and they're related because, like say, like I said, I pointed, the sun's right there, so the water is moving, gravity's being pulled by the sun and the moon. If the moon comes up and they're real close, then the tides are bigger. So we're having big minus tides now. It'd be perfect to go out on the beach, but you get more time on the beach because of the minus tides. The tide goes way down.
The big tides that we get, that's what really brings the different foods to the beach and allows us access to them, and in abundance. So we've got our abalone, oysters, our gumboots, and seaweed, of course, sea asparagus, all the different things we collect on the beach. It's just that much more land to be able to harvest, and having a 18, 19 foot tides that we do have, it just makes it that much more abundance that we can have.
I think the tide cycle is everything. I've heard this phrase from Yakutat to here, when the tide is out, the table is set. Because so much of our foods, there's a lot of food right now, even with the high tide. So much of our foods and things come from the ocean.
We typically fish for the four species of salmon. We have 5. The first is the Chinook salmon, which has its own. We don't catch them as much in our nets. We usually go trolling for those. The next one would be the pink salmon, or humpies, that we catch a lot early in the summer, about midsummer. The second one to come in would be the reds, or sockeye salmon. Next would be silver salmon and the chiscojo, and then the final one is the chum, or dog salmon.
Fishermen rely on a lot of the tides and currents, and a good place to set your net is where there's a current coming around a point. So that a lot of people rely on tides, and if you don't catch fish, you don't make money. Like I say, a guy that knows how to read tides real good usually catches a little more than the guy that doesn't know anything about the tides.
I am Daniel Marsden Jr. I am a 5th generation fisherman from Metlakatla. The tides have blessed us with the fish to be able to harvest.
I think the main difference between tides and currents would have to do with the force of moving the water. So currents are a large movement of water that's driven by wind movement or other physical characteristics of the water, whereas tides are driven by the moon's gravitational pull. And so currents will exist more in like the wider ocean body, whereas tides are going to be happening just along that coastal margin. And that coastal margin may be, several hundred feet, but it's not going to be quite as large on a scale as a current may be moving through a zone.
The outgoing tide is, if you're not careful in some spots on the water, it can get dicey or rough because it's working against each other. And so you can see just on the top of the water how it flows. And so it's always, they either work together or work against each other.
because you don't want to be towing against a current. You tow against the current, it's just gonna, you run your boat too hard, or you tighten your lines a little too much. It's not something you want to do. You want to fish with the tide and fish with the current. My uncles, my dad, and they've all just taught me the game, brought me into it, and my path has been paved for me since I was born. They all knew I was going to be a fisherman, and that's just, I guess they're not elders yet, but they're the ones who kind of keep us, tell us what to do, and make sure we're safe out there.
Lachshulda, well, I guess there's a couple of words, but Lachshulda is probably my favorite way to say it, and it's the one that my grandma also used the most. So lach is like on, or like on parallel with something, and then part of the root word in Sm'algyax is fearsome or dreaded. And the way it was explained to me by Medik, Johnny Reese, and Ashley Dow, which is Terry Burr, it's not because the ocean is something that we should be fearful of or be scared of. That's just a reminder of how tremendously powerful it is.
They have to pay attention. They really do have to pay attention to the tide, and if it's starting to rise, and check it before you head out on the beach. Find out what it's doing, if it's either going up or going down.
So it's really, you really at a young age, you have to really understand the tides. Even with our grandparents, you know, we go down the beach, you don't get stuck in one area, especially like this area here in Sm'algyax. The water goes quite a ways out and comes in very quickly, so it's quite dangerous sometimes, so you gotta really take that into account as well.
There is one place like right in front of town, we call it the Sandbar, and it's a real distinct area. There's like a path that leads out to this reef, and it's a really substantial tidal flat. But the sandbar is taller or higher than the sand flats itself. So if you get out to that reef and the tide's coming in fast, especially if it's like a -3 or 4 sometimes, and it's coming in fast, you could be out on that reef and turn around and look towards town, and that path that you took out to that reef is gone. So sometimes you're waiting up to your chest high to get back to the beach.
A lot of us don't go do something unless we know exactly what we're doing and what's going on. And it's a big part of life here, the beaches and the sea life and stuff. So it's kind of baked into us in knowing what the tides are doing. Divers need to understand the tides and currents because it gets very dangerous in the heavy currents. And then we have certain places on the island where, you know, the more seasoned divers will let the new divers know that, you know, these aren't places where you can actually dive. And when you've got a minus tide, that means the tide's running that much harder, and it's that much harder to try to swim in, and it makes it a little more dangerous. So there's a lot of times where they'll hold off a fishery just because it's a big minus tide and it's a little more dangerous.
There was a few times where you'd be on the bottom and everything would be fine. You're swimming and you're harvesting and everything's good and you're listening to music and everything's, you know, you're happy. And then the tables turn and the tides turn, and it's just like somebody's, you know, flipped a switch and everything starts rushing out, you know, and you're crawling on the bottom to get back to the anchor or to the anchor line or to the bag line. I've been in places where you can actually see the animals you're harvesting, for instance, sea cucumbers, tumbling down in the tide because it is strong. You know, sometimes it's stronger on the upper edge of the column and sometimes it's stronger below, but I guess the point is you just got to be prepared for it because you can't stop it, you can't work with it, you got to work around it.
Currents are very, very important, especially if there's going to be any boating or kayaking or anything like that, to know when the tides are running and where the currents are going. Because there's places on the island where, if even close to the beach, if you're in the wrong place and you don't know, you can get carried out to sea.
Currents are the most vicious in the wintertime. I would say September to June because those are the most unpredictable times of the year. Summertime's unpredictable, but when you got high velocity of wind and huge tides, when they go opposite each other, it's completely, you know, chaos.
You know, I've seen kids back behind me on kayaks, and they're paddling around out there, and they get out too far, and the wind takes them, the current takes them. Next thing you know, they're across there by the rocks out there. And the lucky people got boats, and they go out there and rescue them. And it happened 3 or 4 times. I seen last summer, and I look at the young person. So did you learn a lesson?
The tides coming in and the currents bring in the nutrients from the deep ocean. And that's what we have. If we didn't have the currents, it would just be water mixing, going up and down. But it's really the deep ocean currents, the cold moving up from the deep, and vice versa. It's kind of a cold and warm dance of the water that happens, and the tides will bring those nutrients in and take whatever toxins or whatever's in the water that we don't need, and then it'll bring it back out. So it's a really good system.
Tides, currents, the ocean in general, you can see changes for sure. Go on this other side of the island and you can kind of see where this is happening, where the tree line is getting washed out because storms are getting bigger, the tide's getting higher, and it is affecting our food. Like 2 or 3 years ago, such a horrible year for seaweed. And I think it's really important for young people to know how everything is connected.
In Metlakatla here, I like to think that we look to our strengths when we look to the future and look at what we have and what we can do. And it's a big portion of what we can do is the tides and the currents, and using what we can to go forward into the future, have food security, and secure also our traditions. The traditions that we have are very, very important. It's really who we are. I do seaweed in the minus tides, and you're very aware of what the tides are. 2-3 months ahead of time, I'll know what days I'm going to go and get seaweed, or these other things, and you make your time to do those things and to pass those things down.
Yeah, just to get them to understand that we all should be stewards of our land and waters. Numna Welt, that responsibility belongs to all of us, not just some of us. We should do what we can. Because it's a multi-generational thing. That's how traditionally our education system worked, is the grandpas, the grandmas, the aunties and uncles, nephews and nieces all kind of working together, pulling together to provide for each other.
I just take it for granted, but it isn't until you're out there by yourself in your boat and you're cruising along like you're going somewhere to check out a new beach or a new area to troll, and you sit back and you look and you think to yourself, man, it's so beautiful here.